Hello everybody and welcome back to day 2 of economics. So the way I usually like to start things off is by looking at the terms that we're going to be using throughout the lesson, throughout the class. And so the first thing that I would like you to do, and it doesn't have to be on an index card if you're working from home, you can do it on the back of your notes, you can do it wherever, but I want you to take these 5 terms right here, and I want you to try to put them in your own words. Don't look them up or anything like that, and if one of them looks blank, that's cool. But I want you to take a look at these 5 words. We've got scarce, cost, trade-off, want, and need. All right, and so we use some of these terms a lot in our day-to-day lives, but I want to make sure that we're using them in the right context as far as this lesson goes. So if you need to pause me for a second in order to just go ahead and jot it down real quick, that's good. And then we'll kind of talk about it a little bit together. All right, so first off, let's look at this word scarce, or you might see it in the context of scarcity. So when something's scarce, then that means that there's a limited amount of this good, but that there's some kind of demand for it. So think about goods that maybe have been scarce over the past couple months, that maybe used to be on the shelves of your grocery store, but have kind of vanished for a little bit, right? If you think about things like toilet paper or protective masks, things like that, all of those are really scarce right now. All right, and so we're going to look at what causes scarcity and how, as humans, we deal with that. All right, secondly, when we look at cost, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of you put down something in relation to money. Right, we think of the cost of a car being several $1,000s, or the cost of a house being $100,000. But it's not just necessarily money, right? Every action that you do is going to have a cost. It might be your time, it might be your patience, it might be your brain power. No matter what happens, there's always going to be a cost to it. All right, when we look at trade-offs in this class, we're looking at it in relation to a context of your different options. Right? So some of you chose to come to class and learn this way, and your trade-off is you're giving up virtual learning. Some of you chose virtual learning and you're giving up that in-person class. But I'm sure that everyone had their own reasons for why they chose what they did. All right, and finally, when we look at want versus need, it's a little bit more complex than you might normally think. Want, of course, is just an item that you don't necessarily have to have, but would benefit you in some way. A need, on the other hand, we usually look at it in a context of something necessary for survival. And what that means for each of us is kind of different, right? We can all agree that food or water or shelter might be a need, but what about like a car or a cell phone? So for me, I would say that a car would be a need. Maybe I could live without it, but I couldn't live in my current standard of living. If I had to drive my bike, 2 hours to school every day, I doubt I would be as good of a teacher. Same thing with 2 hours back, I wouldn't get as much done. All right, and so we'll look at these words in that kind of context today. All right, so the way I like to start out this class is thinking about a toy that some of you maybe had whenever you were a kid. Some of you may have never heard of them before, but we have the Tickle Me Elmo doll here. All right, so we can just read through this together. But during the holiday season of 1996, a children's toy appeared on Good Morning America. The toy, produced by a company named Mattel, had sat on the shelves with very little sales until it appeared on the show. After the toy's appearance, its popularity improved, and it became the most sought-after product of the holiday season. Unfortunately, Mattel did not anticipate the doll's popularity, only producing 400,000 units, and they were not able to provide the product in a timely manner at the store level. There was over 1 million of them that were demanded. All right, and so just sit for a second and think about what this would look like in the real world. We've got a context that some of us have maybe seen. Maybe it's with a new phone, maybe it's a new type of shoes, but they ran out of this product. So based on your knowledge of this, what do you think would happen next? What do you think would happen with the price of the good? Well, over that holiday season, the prices went up by like tenfold. So people were selling them for $200, $300, $500, so they were out of this world expensive. And we see that a lot with goods that we purchase. If you think about medicine as a good example, if you have a family member or a friend that is diabetic or has asthma, that inhalers and EpiPens are really, really expensive. But they're really expensive for a reason. It's not because the materials cost that much. It's not because the research was that expensive. Sometimes it's expensive, but not that expensive. It's because there's such a high demand for it, and there's only one person controlling the production of it. And so we're going to look at that as kind of a theme of this class. All right, and so while you're filling out your notes, I want you to you can pause me at any point, but I do want you to fill it out on the guided notes that I provided on Google Class as well. And so you'll fill that out, and if you ever need me to slow down, of course you could just pause me, and that's a very big benefit of doing this online. But when we're looking at economics to start out with, it's good to be on the same page. So first off, we're looking at how individuals make choices, businesses make choices, government makes choices. And so we all do this the same way. We think about what's available to us, we think about the cost that that's going to meet for us, and then we've got to make a decision. So some of you knew that you wanted to work from home this year. The coronavirus was just not worth it. Maybe you learn well virtually anyway. Maybe you do best with technology. Some people, on the other hand, knew that virtual learning just wasn't going to work for them. They have to be there in person. They have to have somebody to talk to. That's myself. I'm a social person. All right, all of this is economics. Economics is studying the way that we make decisions, the incentives that we use to make decisions. So we like to say that economics, more so than just being a social studies, is a social science. And science has its own laws in which it has to be met by. So a couple things that we do economics based on. First off is that all goods are scarce, right? Even things that we have a lot of. Think about sunlight, right? That there's a finite amount of sunlight, and eventually, I mean millions of years, it could run out, right? We think we have infinite air, but if we keep depleting the rainforest, maybe that won't always necessarily be the case. So we make these decisions knowing that goods are scarce. Secondly, we make these decisions based on the fact that most people operate in a way that they're going to gain personally from it. All right, and so this can be selfish or this can be non-selfish. For me, I love my job. It's not about money for me, but there's a personal gratification I get, right? There's plenty of other jobs that I'm qualified to do that maybe I can make more money out of it. But for my own selfish reasons, I love teaching, and so that's what I want to do. All right, another is that we operate in a way that maximizes our efficiency. And that's one of the good things about this virtual learning. You can go at your own pace. If you need to pause and rewind, you can. And so we're always trying to find that next best thing. And so even if, COVID-19 disappeared at the end of this semester, I would imagine that we would see some form of virtual learning still going on now that we're seeing how efficient it can be. All right, another big thing, assumption that we make is that the government's role is to stabilize. I'm sure you all have, read articles about sweatshops or seen, TV clips about pollution. The government's job is to say, okay, businesses and people, you should get to make the decisions that you want as long as it's not harming others. So the government's there to kind of regulate things. And finally, no matter how good we get at this, it's impossible to predict the future. But there's certain things and certain tools that we can learn in this class that'll make it a little bit easier. Right? Like one thing that I knew going into this pandemic was that, all right, if people are going home sick and not working, our economy is going to take a big hit by that. When our economy does poorly, the next step for our government is to lower down interest rates on car loans, bank loans, student loans. And so it's no coincidence that this is when I decided to go back to college. It's no coincidence that this is when my wife and I are looking at buying a new house, right? We knew that with these lower interest rates, everything's going to be a little bit cheaper. All right, and so you can use these economic tools to help predict the future, but even the best of us, it's still very, very difficult. All right, so this takes us back to some of the vocabulary we started out with the opener, right? So all of economics comes down to scarcity. If we had unlimited money, if we had unlimited food, if we had unlimited shelter for people, then we wouldn't really have to make that many tough decisions. But if you look at our government right now, they're having to make the toughest decisions they've had to make in a long time. We're already in a lot of debt. There's a lot of people that are homeless right now. There's a lot of people that don't have jobs right now. And so they're having to decide, all right, who gets the money? Is it the people that are poorest, the individual families? Is it the businesses that provide jobs to people? Is it a combination? And so they're having to deal with this scarcity just as much as we are right now. All right, and we talked a little bit about the needs and wants already. All right, and so you can see that the government's idea of needs maybe has expanded a little bit. Think about all the government programs that we have that are designed at helping meet the needs of the people, whether it's Section 8 housing, whether it's food stamps or free and reduced lunch. There's all kinds of programs that are developed, especially for younger people as well, that can help meet these needs. Even within the state of Georgia, the state of Georgia has acknowledged that education is a need. And so if you're looking at going to college, Hope Scholarship, Pell Grant, those are things that are designed at helping meet these needs that you have. All right, a couple other things that might be a little bit more familiar with, or you might be a little bit more familiar with. We're going to talk about goods and services a lot in this class. Goods, of course, are nouns. Anything you can hold in your hand. Buying a house, buying a car, getting a new cell phone, all of those would be goods. And services would be verbs or actions. So yesterday I got my hair cut, or last week I took in my car to get its oil changed. All of those would be services. All right, and so we'll talk about different kinds of goods and services within this class. I just want to make sure that our terminology is kind of all on the same page. All right, so two words that people often get mixed up, and I want to make sure that we're on the same page with these, is the term scarcity and shortage. So what happened with that Tickle Me Elmo doll was a shortage. A shortage is a man-made issue. Think about toilet paper, right? Whether it's at the beginning of the pandemic, whether it's during the hurricane season, all right? It's not that there's not enough paper in the world to go around. It's not enough that there's not enough toilet paper. Georgia actually is one of the biggest toilet paper producing states in the country. It's just that we couldn't meet the need fast enough. All right, and so this would be a shortage. A good example of this, think about a time where you've been in the cafeteria and there was one line that was out of food, right? Usually it's one of the more popular lines. So think about it being like the chicken strip line or the chicken wings. It's not because there's not enough chickens in the world to feed you all. Georgia is a big chicken producing state. All right, the issue is we didn't order enough for that day. And usually it's some kind of freak occurrence that causes this shortage. So maybe it's raining outside and not as many people want to go out to eat. Maybe they're selling ice cream in the cafeteria and so more people stay at the school than go out that day. Either way, a shortage is when there's a man-made occurrence that leads to not having enough of something. Scarcity is what we see across the board, right? Having limited resources. So we deal with this scarcity in a lot of different ways. Think about oil as a good example for this. We are really, really reliant on oil, whether it's cars, trains, airplanes, but it's a non-renewable resource, which means that over the next couple decades, we're going to start running out of this resource, and we have to decide, how do we deal with this scarcity? And so you guys have probably seen these changes go on throughout your life. If you drive down Harry Driggers, you've probably seen that solar farm that's out there. Right now, most of the electricity we use in Glenn County comes from a coal plant in Jacksonville. And so once this coal starts to get more expensive, once we start to run out of it, then we're going to have to deal with alternatives. Same thing with cars. You're starting to see cars with much better fuel efficiency. You're starting to see cars that are electric. You're starting to see more charging stations. And so these are all ways that we're trying to deal with this scarcity. All right, so what I would like you to do next, and if you have this slide up on your presentation, you can just click on the hyperlink there. What we're going to do is we're going to watch a video on a company called De Beers Diamonds. So De Beers Diamonds controls about 90% of the diamond mines in the world. All right, whenever new diamond mines pop up, they immediately offer them millions of dollars. That way they can be the only ones to produce it. In economics, we call this a monopoly. That prefix mono just meaning one. Like a monocle would be one glass that you're wearing. All right, and so this one company owns about 90% of the diamond mines in the world. All right, and so any normal jewelry shop that you think of, like Kay Jewelers, Reed's, Zales, they all get their diamonds from this De Beers Diamonds company. If they sell any diamonds that don't belong to De Beers, then De Beers won't sell them at all. So they've got a complete control over this industry. So the first thing I want you to think about before we watch this video is what utility do diamonds have in our economy, right? So largely they're used for jewelry, but a big social custom that we have in our country is engagement rings. And so one thing I want you to really think about this when we're watching is an engagement ring a want or a need? Sure, we can all say that, yeah, diamonds are really worthless. I mean, if De Beers Diamonds released every diamond they had in the world, the average carat would cost about $2 instead of $2,500. All right, so the big thing I want you to think about while you're watching this is are diamonds a want or a need, and what should we do about it? So go ahead and pause this. I want you to watch the video of the link above, and then what I would like you to do on the Google Doc that's provided, it'll say, De Beers Diamonds day 2, next to the presentation. I want you to answer this in one paragraph. Do you think De Beers Diamonds should be forced to release their diamonds into the market so they can't create this artificial shortage? So go ahead and pause me here. I want you to go ahead and watch the video, and then I want you to answer this question just in a paragraph form. Okay, so I want you to hold on to this for a second. So whenever we get to the discussion portion of the class, after we get done with the presentation, I am going to want to talk about this. I think this is really important to see where your heads are at with this. All right, some people maybe see diamonds as a need, right? For me, there's no way that I could have imagined proposing to my wife without a diamond. I would have felt cheap, right? It's just kind of the way we're encultured. All right, but not everybody feels that way. So let's look at something that's a little bit more complicated. So we don't have a video for this one, but what I want to look at next is this drug called Daraprim. All right, so the purpose of this drug is to alleviate symptoms for HIV, right? It used to be that HIV was a death sentence. You had about 10 years before your immune system was compromised. However, people like Magic Johnson who have had HIV for 20 or 30 years, this is the drug that they use in order to stay alive. So it doesn't get rid of HIV, but it does let you live a pretty normal life with HIV. So anyway, several years ago, the right to produce this drug was bought by a wealthy investor named Martin Shkreli. So he raised the cost of this pill from $13.50, and you take one pill per day, from $13.50 to $750 a pill. So that means that every day, that one pill is going to cost you $750. So my question to you is the same as the last slide. Should the government intervene here, and why? All right, so I want you to write a paragraph, and you can just do it underneath the last paragraph. All right, and I want you to explain to me whether you think the government should or should not step in here and why. So if you want to pause me here, that's great. Finish this up, and then we'll come back to it in just a second. All right, so we're going to leave this off here for now. All right, what I would like you to do after you're done switching or watching this video, I want you to switch over to my Google Meet. So the access to the Google Meet will be on my Google Classroom. There will be a link to it on there. And it should be around the same spot as this PowerPoint and the notes of video and things like that. So switch over to the Google Meet, and I'll explain what I want you to do going forward now. First, we're going to discuss the video that we just watched. Secondly, I want to talk to you about how we're going to do vocabulary in this class. Thank you all for joining me. I'll talk to you guys in just a second.